Good morning, fellow followers of Christ, and those who are just curious. Now, being a Christian for a while now, there's been an idea that I've just passively accepted as just part of who I am. But the other day I was struck with the question about this idea. What is the good news of Jesus Christ? It could be that because we've just come off the holiday season, that this idea has been pushed and talked about in church and in music in the popular culture. But no matter where the idea came from, I've had to stop and think about it and in some ways have to unpack it within my own head. The good news of Jesus Christ, as I have traditionally understood it, was that because of our inability to live a perfect life, because of our inherent sinfulness, Jesus, because of his death and subsequent resurrection on the cross, provided for us a way in which we could have a relationship with God, overcoming this sin nature and securing for us a place in heaven. All you had to do was confess your sins and believe that Jesus Christ is Lord. But accepting this good news of Jesus Christ is predicated on us being able to know and understand sin. And this is where it got really wild for me, because God comes to me and says, hey, you really don't know what sin is. And you don't really confess your sin because you don't know what it is. So you really don't know what the good news of Jesus Christ is. Now, when God pointed this out to me, I had to stop and meditate and think on it. And I realized when looking around at the popular culture and Christianity that what God showed me is true. Let me give you a couple examples of this. It's 2018 and Donald Trump is our president, and he says some of the most outlandish things that are so unmoored from the truth that the simplest among us can actually point out and say, no, that's not true. He is also a very wealthy man and takes pride in his greed. He puts his name on steak, on wine, even plastering his name in large letters on hotels and buildings. His penthouse in New York is gilded with golden opulence. Now, for those outside of the faith, the pagans, being a person who flaunts their wealth or doesn't believe in the truth is not necessarily a vice. And for some philosophies, it's even considered a virtue. But for most of Christian history, if you were extremely greedy and not generous with your wealth, or if you were constantly lying about things, you were considered outside of the traditional teachings of the Bible. This was considered a sin. But when Donald Trump won the election, he did so on the strength of 81% of evangelical Christians. What was once considered sinful, lying and not telling the truth, and being greedy and boasting in your wealth, was no longer considered sinful. Now let's take, for example, somebody who lost an election but still retained many Christian votes. And that's Roy Moore. He was a candidate for the United States Senate in Alabama, and he was credibly accused of sexually assaulting teenage girls. In spite of this, he was backed by many Christians and pastors, and all of his campaign rallies had this air of a church service, with hymns being sung and people speaking kind of like you would hear a pastor speak. So now, for Christians, sexual assault against women isn't really considered a sin. What is also not considered a sin, especially when it benefits them, is being gay. Now, it may seem that homosexuality is the one thing that Christians seem to agree on, that it is a sin. However, there was a state representative in Ohio who, despite allegations of him being gay and people accusing him of being gay and inappropriately touching people, he still went on to win his seat in the House of Representatives, and he made his stand supporting traditional values. He did later resign when somebody saw him having sex with another guy in his office. Now, these three examples are just three of the examples that I saw that were large enough that you and I could see to kind of prove my point, that Christians don't really understand what sin is, and when there is sin, they kind of ignore that sin because it's not really sin. But if you also know the Bible and spend time within a local church, you're also going to see this same disregard for sin there as well. And what I've observed is that most of the time, if they do talk about sin, it's always talking about sin of the other, not for them. If you go to a conservative church, it's always going to be the liberals. Or if you go to a liberal church, it's going to be the conservatives who are the ones who are the most egregiously sinful. It's also going to be those who don't look like us, illegal immigrants, the rapists, the people who rob you. It's also going to be like the Muslims. They're the ones who are sinful. They've got all the sin in the world, but they'll ignore the sin within their own congregation. So if those who are not us are the only ones capable of sin, and those that are us, we explain away what is traditionally considered sin, we really don't need the good news of Jesus Christ, because we don't have sin in our lives to be saved from in order to have a relationship with God. And as I meditated on this and thought about this, I was gobsmacked. You see, God only pointed out to me this one small aspect. He dropped this pebble in the lake and the ripples are going out. But all I see is this small piece. And I'm like, well, where do I go from here? God hasn't given me that step. And that's just the next step on this journey of faith for me. I don't know where to go from it, but there it is. But I guess that's the adventure and the journey. My name is David Patton. I post videos most Fridays talking about my Christian faith and my journey through it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends to see what they think. Subscribe by clicking right there. Last week's video about me talking about why I keep doing these videos even though nobody's really watching them will be right about there. Thank you for watching, have a good week, and God bless.